Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Apologies, we just had some Zoom technical issues on our end. I guess, these things do arise when you're working from home, so apologies, but thank you to the participants that have stayed online. So today's webinar is the button battery safety with Adrian Davidson and Gail Greatorex. So today you are listening using your computer speaker system by default. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to Adrian and Gail by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end. Our first presenter today will be Adrian Davidson. Adrian Davidson is a branded merchandise and promotional marketing specialist with over 25 years of industry experience. As a national board member of APPA, he is a champion for promotional product safety, responsible sourcing, and actively driving better education and transparency in the industry. In his role as Managing Director of Inck Merchandise, he works with some of the world's biggest brands, helping deliver creative promotional product solutions and ensuring the logistical and compliance process is managed seamlessly. Having worked on both the agency and client side of the business, as well as extensively on the ground in China, Adrian has a reputation for being an industry leader who generally loves what he does. Now, after Adrian's presentation, he will hand this over to Gail. So Gail has more than 30 years experience with consumer product safety. For 25 years, she was with the ACCC's product safety branch. In 2012, she started her own business, Product Safety Solutions. As a product safety consultant and advocate, Gail maintains a website that provides resources for all sectors and actively posts on issues. She has recently developed 3 online training modules for APPA by the PPAI certification program. Okay, so what I will do is I will now hand this over to Adrian.
Thanks, Ida. Button battery safety is an area very close to my heart. Firstly, as a father of 3 kids, then in my role as a business owner that creates and distributes branded products for kids, and also my APPA board role on the Button Battery Safety Working Committee, which has been a big learning experience for me. So it's good to be able to share that knowledge with you today, and thanks for making the time for this webinar. Again, sorry we're a few minutes late. So we'll cover 3 areas. I'll kick off with 3 reasons why button battery safety is an issue in general, and specifically for APPA members. Gail will cover some detailed ways to minimise the risks and provide a very important update on the regulatory situation that's coming our way. And we'll have a Q&A at the end, so please submit any questions on the Zoom chat during the presentation. So what's the #1 problem with button batteries? To put it bluntly, they can kill. There are too many tragic cases where young children and infants have lost their lives or been critically injured. Summer Steer passed away in June 2013 from swallowing a button battery at 4 years of age. In 2015, Isabella Reese lost her life at just 1 year of age. And they can cause terrible and permanent injury and disability. And did you know that every week in Australia, around 20 children are taken to hospital with fears that they have swallowed a button battery? In early 2019, Shayla Carmichael from Melbourne was in intensive care and an induced coma after doctors found a button battery lodged in her esophagus. And Emmett Rauch from the US has needed 65 different surgeries and a tracheotomy just to be able to breathe and speak again. And the damage they caused Emmett will stay with him for the rest of his life. And if you want to see for yourself just how button batteries do cause injury, just do this test at home, obviously safely. Simply leave a button cell battery on a slice of ham and watch the results, which you'll see after just a few hours, and which this picture shows. So button batteries are a hideously dangerous hazard to young children. The other big issue is that they're literally everywhere. They're commonly found in many different products around the home. And the problem is that babies and young children explore the world by putting things into their mouth, which means that the batteries can easily and often be swallowed or inserted, for example, up their nose or in their ear, without parents or carers knowing. We're all familiar with the common promotional products that you can see at the bottom of this slide that contain button batteries. And most of these products are designed to flash or make an interesting sound which is very appealing to kids and which is why they're battery powered. And if a product has an unsecured battery compartment and the battery can be easily removed or fall out, it's suddenly very dangerous for young kids. So how much of an issue is this for us? Well, unfortunately, there's regular cases of unsafe promotional products that have been the subject of ACCC recalls, such as these two examples. So can you believe that in February this year, Starlight Foundation had a recall for a brand of mini torch that had been given to mums and children using the Starlight Express room at the Women's and Children's Hospital in Adelaide for a period of over 5 years. Now, this is a legacy item because this was actually, you'll see from the recall, for a period between January 2011 and 31st of December 2017, and this recall only came out this year. And thousands of these Cricket Australia promotion LED wristbands, which are accessible button batteries, were given out of the MCG and the GABA, which have gone into family homes and remain as hazards as we speak. Now, none of these are intentional, but they're just two examples of many, many cases, most of which would go unreported. So the third issue that I'd like to cover is about responsibility. And I'm certain that no one in our industry would knowingly sell unsafe products or even realise the seriousness of the issue. Promotional product safety is a complex landscape, and we all source and sell literally thousands of different products every week, the vast majority of which are safe. But if a mistake like this does happen, it's very important to know that as the supplier, we're held responsible. So as APPA members, we have a clear responsibility with the APPA Code of Conduct, and we state that members will comply with all the applicable laws and regulations regarding the safety of products sold, and will meet applicable recognised voluntary industry standards for products and processes. And there's actually a lot of work around that, and it's our responsibility in our day-to-day roles to make time for that. But as businesses, we're bound by consumer law, which is policed by the ACCC, with a very clear requirement that all suppliers of consumer products have a responsibility to sell only safe products. And even if there's not a legal requirement to do so, everyone in the supply chain, from manufacturers, importers, distributors, even decorators, have a responsibility to manage the products that we're supplying to be safe. So whether you're a supplier creating or importing promotional products, or a distributor reselling products to end users, please find a way in your business that allows you to stop any unsafe products that contain button batteries making it into the hands of kids. So to help you with that, Gail, who's a product safety expert, is now going to get into some detail on exactly how to minimise button battery risks, and also give us an important update on some big regulatory changes that are coming our way that's going to be really important to know about. So if you'll just give us a minute, we're gonna swap screens. Over to you, Gail.
Thanks, Adrian. Just bear with me for a moment and I'll hopefully share the right screen, and then we'll be away. Okay, I think we're good. So thank you to APPA in the first instance, who are showing a lot of leadership in product safety. I really think associations are a great way to get the message out, and I'm trying to encourage the ACCC and other regulators to work more with associations. But at the very least, taking an initiative like this is a really good one, and it's great that Adrian has been part of the industry working group as well for quite a few years, and so that's a big commitment from APPA and its members. So as suppliers, you can manage products to eliminate or minimise the hazard. And this can be done in the design stage if you're commissioning products, or just in what you choose to purchase. And there's several ways to do that, and I'll go through them. In product safety, we've got a hierarchy of what's effective. And so with any product, the most effective way you can influence safety is with the design. The next level down is to put guards or protective devices into a product. And the third level is consumer warnings. So consumer warnings are never the answer. You're better off going with the first two options in the first place. So with battery powered devices, first see about designing the product to use a different power source, such as a AAA battery. That completely eliminates the risk of access to button batteries. It's just no longer an issue. The next best option is to design guards into the product, and with button batteries, you're looking to have a battery compartment that's got a child-resistant cover. And then, even if you have a secure compartment for a button battery, a consumer warning would still be important for when the battery is being changed or the product breaks. So the first thing you can do in terms of product design, as I said, design the product such that it doesn't use a button battery in the first place. And then if that's not possible, although you're not eliminating the hazard, you might be able to have a non-replaceable battery. So sometimes, you know, if you've got a product that's likely to not even last as long as the battery lasts, maybe a non-replaceable battery is the way to go. So for a single-use cheap product, maybe like finger lights or little imitation tea candles, that might be the go. This is an example, and these are my own photos, because one of your members had come to me to show me that he had negotiated a redesign within his business. So a keyring torch that on the top photo it shows did have 3 small button batteries. He managed to get that replaced with one that used a single AAA battery. From my point of view, I don't think that there's a downside for the end user. It's still a viable product. It looks the same. It's going to serve the same purpose. Job done. So that's a great option if you can explore that one. So if you do have to have replaceable button batteries, there's 4 things you can do. And in the first instance, there's the packaging of the batteries themselves, which may be a consideration for some products that you supply. You need to secure the battery compartments, ensure the product can withstand foreseeable day-to-day use, and then provide consumer information. And they're all kind of integrated with one another, those measures. So, child-resistant packaging of batteries. Battery packs is actually one of the main ways that kids access the batteries. I don't know if anyone saw the reports last week of a Sydney toddler who in January had chewed her way through a battery pack. Maybe it was one that wasn't properly child-resistant, maybe just had cardboard on one side. She ended up in surgery after her esophagus and her windpipe fused because the battery got stuck in her esophagus. It looks like she's going to make a full recovery because I think they picked it up very quickly, but that was an alarming story to read just last week. Of course, Energizer has its own obligations as a retailer of batteries, but as APPA members who supply products, you may also provide batteries for the consumer to insert, or maybe provide some extra batteries as replacement ones. So it's vital that if you're supplying batteries separate from the product, that they come in child-resistant packaging. The next thing is secure battery compartments. So again, on the right there's a photo that I took of my sister's keyring, and she's got one of those nice little press button torches, but to change the battery, you'd need a very small Phillips head screwdriver and to unscrew those 4 screws. So that would be regarded as child resistant. Other ways of doing it, probably with our ordinary old AA battery compartments, you'll find it's, you just press one side and the cover comes off. To make something more child resistant, some of the standards for child-resistant battery compartments talk about 2 simultaneous movements, and they might be ones where you have to push one side and then press another, something like that, which is harder for children to understand, especially young children. We do have evidence that children up to about 6 years old are swallowing batteries. And so, you know, the older a child gets, the more ingenuity they have in how to get access to things. And so something like the 2 movements, or even the coin twist, many of you would be familiar with a battery compartment that has a little groove in it designed to use a coin to open up. Now, most children probably wouldn't think about that and couldn't operate it, but lots of kids can and do. And so, and you know, sometimes with those coin twist ones, they're not as tight. They become loose over time. Sometimes you can just use them, maneuver them with 2 thumbs without even having to go and find a coin. So they're not always as child resistant as might be necessary. Now, another aspect is the integrity of the product itself. Will a product survive day-to-day use? So, for example, this is a fidget spinner that got recalled late last year. It was a light-up one, so it had a button battery on it. That sort of product in normal use, normal foreseeable use, is going to be dropped. It might be thrown across the room, it might fall down the back of the couch and be squished, might be sat on. All of those things are foreseeable. There are tests that are designed to assess a product's ability to withstand those kind of day-to-day experiences. You might be familiar with the toy standard, which puts toys for children under 3 under a similar set of tests. So there's a drop test, there's a tension test, a twist and pull, push, and biting. All of those sort of things are likely to be included in this kind of test for to make sure that if a product drops, it doesn't break enough to let the button battery out or be exposed. Now, consumers need to be alerted on a regular basis with button batteries. As Adrian said, you know, they really are everywhere. They're in so many products. And we need to emphasise too, it's not just children's products that are the risk here, because as we know, kids get access to car keys, to remote control devices for the TV, for calculators, for scales. And so the information is not just relating to kids' toys, and the measures don't just relate to kids' products. It's important to have a constant reminder for parents, partly because there's new parents and new occasional carers or grandparents all the time. It's helpful to alert people prior to making a purchase. So in a retail environment, there's expectations that a product will have an alert to say, hey, this product's got a button battery in it and there's some hazards associated with it, so that people might choose, especially if you've got young children, you might choose not to buy that product and choose the one next to it on the shelf that has AA's or something. There's also a need to have information if an accident does happen. So in an emergency, if a parent or carer is aware that a button battery may have been swallowed, and because the damage can start occurring very quickly, the information needs to be there on the package of the batteries or of the product, or even preferably on the product itself. And so, you know, that's not always easy to achieve for businesses to put all of those labels on, but that's what is going to be considered as part of the necessary hazard management. In fact, I'm just thinking that case I mentioned of the Sydney toddler that was reported on last week, I think the story said that she seemed a little bit tired, and then her mum left her out in the care of someone else for a couple of hours when she had to do something. When she came back, she was like a rag doll. And so the mother knew that something had happened. So they didn't know what had happened at that stage. So they took her to the hospital. But it just goes to show how quickly these things can happen. This picture is from my own kitchen scales, and they're a little bit old. I'm not really into baking. I haven't taken on the latest sourdough challenge, but it does at least have some of the general information that you'd require. It doesn't have all of the stuff that's recommended in the guidelines, but it does tell us that batteries are harmful if swallowed. So that's the warning. And it says to keep it out of reach of children. So that's good advice and something that you can presumably do relatively easily with a kitchen scale. It doesn't tell you what to do if the child climbs up onto the kitchen bench and gets access to it. And it doesn't have any kind of symbol, which is something that is encouraged to help people who don't read English understand that there might be a hazard. So I'd like to just move on to government policy. I'm not sure if you've got any New Zealand members participating today or listening in. The MBIE, through its trading standards section, put out a policy statement a few years ago, and that's currently where things are at, I believe, with New Zealand. And so that's available on the website and should be followed. In Australia, we've got an industry code, and we've had that for several years now, and that's what Adrian and I have been on the working group to create that. And that's been endorsed by the government regulators, but it's essentially voluntary. And there's been a lot of people adopt the measures included in that guide, in the code, and there's been a lot of improvement, but because it's voluntary and not necessarily well known, it's not been enough to achieve good levels of compliance within the Australian market. And that's why the ACCC has now moved toward introducing a mandatory standard. So I'd like to just go through what's in the mandatory standard. Some of you may have seen the actual discussion paper. In fact, there's been two. One was an initial proposal, and then 6 months later or so, they've put out a further consultation document with what they are actually planning to bring in. The proposal includes secure compartments, of course, and in fact they've gone with recommending it only be screws and not the other methods that we discussed. And it might be that they're captive screws, that are screws that kind of stay somehow attached to the hole in the thread that's come out of, so that they don't get dropped and lost and then not put back in. In fact, the ACCC's proposed set of requirements go quite some distance even beyond what's in the current voluntary code. So they've come out really strong in what they're proposing. The next part is that they've included requirements for product integrity and have outlined some tests that would be set out you need to comply with. There will be requirements for child-resistant packaging and a set of labelling in various forms, including either on the product packet, on the retail shelves if it's not on the packet, on the product itself in some cases, on the retail batteries or spare batteries, and in the case of products that don't have any of those things, there may need to be some additional packaging. So nothing's yet decided. Submissions for people to comment, stakeholders to comment on the proposal closed at the end of April. And the ACCC is now considering all of those submissions and will, in the next coming months, make a decision on what actual form will be taken for the mandatory standard. So as I said, it goes beyond the current industry code, which means that it's very likely that the standard will require changes to be made in the products that are obtained for the Australian market and sold onto the market. There will be a lead time, and in the paper, in the consultation paper, they asked whether 12 months would suffice. And I've seen quite a few submissions that said, look, 12 months will be okay for some products, but with other products, it's going to be a bit tricky. So they've talked about 18 months and maybe even a bit extra, given the pandemic challenges. So there will be some lead time for suppliers and businesses to comply. In terms of promotional products, obviously there will be changes to the actual products that you supply. You know, if you'll be able to go and have a look at whether your product might already comply. So if you were selling like those little blue keyring lights that I showed earlier, that would be enough to probably meet the secure compartment, and it might also, you'd probably need to test it for product integrity, but you'd then probably need to put some kind of package around it or a label of some description, but then you could say, look, you know, I can achieve compliance within 6 months, and that'll be sweet, and then you won't have to worry about it any further. Of course, the earlier that businesses are able to comply with a standard, the better it is for everybody, not least the consumers. It does occur to me, though, that, and this is something that the ACCC didn't pick up on in its discussion paper, even though it went for something like 76 pages or something like that, for small products, maybe like tea light candles, if you think about like in a $2 shop where they've got just a display box where the candles sit, and you just pick one out and purchase that. There's no actual packaging to put a label on that's available prior to people making a purchase decision. Those ones are going to be required to have some kind of signage at the retail shelf or at the cash register to alert consumers. Now, you guys won't have that option, so I'm envisaging that you might need to put some new individual packaging. It might be a cellophane, sealed cellophane pack around things, small items like little key rings and tea light candles, or even like those wristbands. So that'll be one extra cost. I'm not sure whether APPA actually put in a submission, and I'll talk to Adrian about that later, because I think APPA should probably do something to provide its comments on the proposal. But in my own submission, which will be made public, it may even already be public on the ACCC website, I did point out that that will be a unique requirement for promotional products that don't otherwise have a retail outlet. So what to do in the meantime, while we're waiting for the ACCC to announce what its final proposal is, and when I say the ACCC, it actually has to be signed off by the relevant minister within the Treasury. I'm not sure who that is at the moment, but we'll need to, hopefully, once the ACCC finalises its proposal and gets agreement from each of the states and territories, I think, which is probably also necessary, we'll hopefully get the minister to sign off on it toot sweet, because otherwise everyone's just in limbo. But while we're waiting for that, I suggest that you review your range to see whether you can move to any alternative battery types and implement some relevant elements of the code that maybe, I mean, I'm thinking with a pending set of different regulatory requirements, you might not want to be investing a lot in achieving compliance with a code that is on its way out, potentially. But nonetheless, I mean, you can still have a look at the ACCC's consultation document to give you some clues, and those are the things that you can do in the meantime. So I think it's important to go back and just review your range if you haven't done so already, and see what can be done in the meantime, and then monitor the Product Safety Australia website for what's the next step. And that's me done. So happy to open it up to questions and answers.
Thank you, Gail and Adrian, for putting together this presentation for us. Okay, so it appears we do have a couple of questions, so thank you to the participants that have submitted them. The first one is, where can I find out more information? Okay, in fact, I meant to leave that share screen on because that looks better if I do that. Now I've got to work out how to do it. We have a couple of options there. It's the ACCC's Product Safety Australia website is really the go-to site, which hopefully all members are aware of and familiar with. That's got quite a bit of information on button batteries. It's not always all in the same place. If you haven't already subscribed to get updates from the Product Safety Australia website, do that. Apart from anything else, you'll get to see new recalls, which is always important. But also check the news section, because sometimes they put stuff in the news section that doesn't get linked across to their other details. So do that. There's also my own website, productsafetysolutions.com.au, and I've written a number of blogs about button batteries, and those who are interested can find out more information. I've even got a little blog dedicated to, in fact, it might even be a page rather than a post, that is dedicated to giving gold stars to suppliers who have done the right thing. And on that you'll find the torch that I showed earlier. They're the two main sites I think that I would recommend. I don't know that there's too many others, but as I said, accessing that ACCC consultation paper from March, which is available from the ACCC's consultation hub on the accc.gov.au site. There's, as I said, about 76 pages of information if you want any kind of backup with lots of data in it and stuff. Thanks, Ida. Thanks, Gail. Our second question is, how long will it take for the ACCC to settle the proposed standard?
Yeah, that's really a rule of thumb. I believe, I mean, they've said really that they are giving priority to this. I think that they've really dragged their heels till now, and then the heat's been on them to do it, and the consultation paper was an excellent one. And they've got what they've called a task force working on it, but there will have been quite a few submissions put in, and it might take a little while to work through what the final option is. But it's really important that happen. I did also on my website, I've put in, when the first paper came out, I put in some recommendations on some non-regulatory measures that can be taken, and I'm going to hassle the ACCC to bring in some of those, none of which would necessarily impact suppliers as such, but there's some additional measures that can happen. so that we don't have to wait they make the decision and then wait for the 2-year lead time, for example. So I think they've said, well, they're currently saying during this year we'll find out. I'd certainly hope it wouldn't be any later than, say, springtime this year that we'll get the actual standard declared. Thanks, Ida.
We've had another one come through. So, since distributors buy products from APPA suppliers, which are on-sold to clients, where does the liability lie if an issue arises, distributor or supplier?
Yep, that's a really good question. When we talk about liability, it's a little bit different from regulatory requirements. So, while there's no mandatory, or until there's a mandatory standard that takes effect and we get to the end of the lead period, there's no regulatory liability. What you might have, though, is standard product liability, such that if somebody gets injured, then they can take a party to court to recover damages. So that's standard product liability law, and it applies for any product. And that normally sits with either the main importer, or if it's made in Australia, the manufacturer. So
sorry to interrupt, Gail. I think what's important to add there as well is that for anyone that's importing products, from overseas directly, then the liability clearly lies with them. So if you've got any distributors that are, buying things on Alibaba or from overseas, it's very black and white that you then carry that entire responsibility. So that's where the APPA suppliers are a fantastic option because they're very, very experienced in this sort of product, and also the other products like power banks, which have other potential safety issues.
So when and if a mandatory standard comes in for button batteries, it will be the same. It will be the liability that applies to regulatory requirements, which is, for example, the cosmetic ingredient labelling and the toys for children under 3 that are currently in place. The liability is shared equally amongst all levels of the supply chain with that type of product, with that type of law. So it means that no matter where you are in the supply chain, if you've handled the product and had some role in it, you are, under the law, you're equally liable. So sorry if that's a little bit of a legalistic answer. It's not necessarily straightforward, but everybody, no matter where you sit in the supply chain, you need to be holding your supplier to account for meeting a standard and making a product as safe as it can be.
Thank you, Gail. Now, there doesn't appear to be any more questions, so thank you to the participants that had submitted them. Now, just before we wrap this up, I would like to take this opportunity to mention this week APPA members will receive the digital version of the APPA magazine. So please look out for this email, as Gail will be featuring it regarding the 3 training modules she has developed exclusively for APPA members. Now, these modules are the product safety regulatory system in Australia and New Zealand, product hazards and how to address them, product testing and managing the supply chain. So all modules are based online, which gives you the freedom and flexibility to learn at your own pace in your own time. Using the PPAI's established training platform, APPA members can take full advantage of training content that is more relevant to the training practices within our region. So credits will be gained through the PPI certification program. So thank you, Gail, for putting these training modules together for us. If any questions do come to mind for Gail or Adrian, please send them an email. Their email addresses should be on your screen at the moment.
Not as such, but I think you can go through my website to email me, and Adrian at Inck, you'll find him easily enough.
That's right. So pretty much tomorrow you will receive a follow-up email with the link of today's recording, along with the PowerPoint presentation that Gail has put together. So on behalf of Adrian, Gail and APPA, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you, Adrian and Gail. Thank you.
Thanks, Ida.